And at first he's talking, you're like, oh, the 2 different tubs of water for his feet's kind of weird, but he sounds like he knows what he's talking about. But then he says, one of the reporters asks about sex, and he says like, no sex, no sex. He says something like, I don't know if he says it at that moment, but he definitely says, an erection is a flagpole on your grave. Have you ever had something you love dismissed because it's just pop culture? What others might deem stupid shit, you know matters. You know it's worth talking and thinking about. And so do we. So come overthink with us as we delve into our deep thoughts about stupid shit. I'm Tracie Guy Decker, and you're listening to Deep Thoughts About Stupid Shit. Because pop culture is still culture, and shouldn't you know what's in your head? On today's episode of the podcast, I'll be sharing my deep thoughts about the 1994 film The Road to Wellville with my sister, Emily Guy Birkin, and with you. Let's dive in. Okay, I know you've seen this movie because we briefly talked about it before we hit record, but tell me, what is in your head about The Road to Wellville?
That it was an extremely uncomfortable film to watch with our dad. I remember that Bridget Fonda and another actress, being masturbated by a male doctor to handle their hysteria, if I remember correctly, was something like that.
No, there's nothing about hysteria in it.
No. Okay.
You remember accurately that they were being, it was Cameron Manheim is the actress, and she does an amazing job as Virginia Crane Hill.
Yes.
But they're not hysterical.
It's not hysterical. Okay. I just remember that scene and wondering why sinkholes don't happen when you want
spontaneously.
Them to. Yes. So I remember that because we were in the living room in Dad's house and going like, oh, dear God, why are we watching
Oh, on
this?
Olmsted? Is that where we were?
Yeah, we're on Olmsted Road. So that's what I remember. And then I remember the very end of the film where Kellogg, whose first name I don't remember, saying something along the lines of, and I don't think he used this word because it would not have been in character, but like, my shit is enormous and I believe I will live forever, before jumping into like a lake or a pond or something and dying before he hits the water. And that being kind of funny.
Yeah, you're close. I think his words were, my bowels are impeccable and I may just live forever. Yeah.
So, and the thing is, I know that I think historically, I might be conflating two things, but like graham crackers and then like Kellogg's cornflakes, and I think these other things were created partially to be bland because it was thought that would discourage masturbation.
I mean, they don't go into that in this film. I don't think you're wrong, but they don't go into those things in this film.
So that's just an aspect of like just trivia I haven't. I know that's true about graham crackers. I know that, but I can't remember if that's related to Kellogg or a different health guru from around that point in time. And the idea, like all of the weird alterna health shit from that time, a lot of it had to do with discouraging touching yourself.
Yeah.
Which is why it was so weird that then, like, there was also a side business in, like, masturbating women.
Oh, that was an alternative. That was not someone who was in this movie. That is actually a rival who is not sanctioned by Kellogg whatsoever.
Yes.
So,
but that was a different, anyway. That's what's in my head about it. I have not revisited it. I think I've talked about how as a writer, I don't write spicy scenes just because, the idea of Dad reading it, even though he's been gone for nearly 13 years, but just the idea of Dad reading it, the level of embarrassment would be large enough that it could destroy the earth. So, which is why I've never seen this movie again. I mean, I was, 15 when it came out?
94, so yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So it is more than 30 years past, and I still just like, I'm blushing just thinking about it. So tell me, why are we talking about it today?
So it came up in conversation recently with one of my partners, actually, and I was like, oh yeah, I remember that film. That was a weird film. Maybe I should rewatch that film. So that's why we're talking about it now. All I remember is thinking it was funny. I didn't even remember having watched it with Dad.
Really?
Maybe I would have resisted if I had remembered that. But
the 3 years between 15 and 18 is pretty big.
Yeah, true. So there's not a whole lot at stake. This was just one of those things where I was like, oh yeah, I'm going to put that on the list. And that was like right before we did our scheduling last time we did our scheduling. So here we are. Sometimes it works out that way. So there's not a whole lot at stake. It's just a thing that I, remember from that time right at the end of high school, the beginning of college. And I thought, like, let's see what this is about. The things that I remembered most were actually the estranged son, like hanging his coat up over and over and over again, and then finally being told he could stop and just dropping it, even though he had hung it up like hundreds of times. And the masturbation scene, or the masturbating the women scene. Those were the two things I remember the most. But anyway,
is there a word for that when someone does it to someone else?
Manipulation?
Clitoral manipulation?
Yeah, I'm fingering. I don't know. Anyway, all right. So let me give you some postcards from the destination. Folks don't have a whole lot to say about this film. Like, usually when I Google a film this old, like there have been retrospectives, like the things that show up on our list anyway. They're like, such and such movie 20 years later or 30 years later or whatever. Like, most of what I found was contemporaneous. Like, people are not talking about this movie, which is sort of interesting. But here's some postcards. So this film, so many poop jokes, fart jokes, masturbation jokes. Like, if that's your thing, like, this is your movie. Like, if you like scatological humor, like, you should go rewatch this movie. And like, there's a lot of boobies. A lot of these actresses actually have their breasts visible, and a lot of male tush, like so many male tushies. So I don't know if that's your thing. Again, this is your movie. So I want to talk a bit about sexuality as it's presented in this movie, male versus female, and some of the like anxiety and like anti-sex messages in this movie about those two, which is a little unusual. Like, usually from society writ large, like, we're very careful to police female sexuality, and men were largely like, attaboy. And that's not what happens in this film. So I want to talk about that role reversal a little bit. I want to talk about like messages about capitalism, and specifically like health-based capitalism, like health as business, that come through this movie, which I think will lead into the other thing I want to talk about, which is like why it's set at the turn of the 20th century, like why mid-90s this turn of the 20th century thing was appealing to enough people to get this movie greenlit, and this all-star cast, which I think is relevant. So those are the kind of postcards. So let me see if I can, I'm not going to try and do like a blow by blow, because the director, whose name was Alan Parker, was like very much in love with sort of paralleling different things. Like, oh, look, this thing is happening. This thing's happening at the same time, and it's kind of similar. See how it's kind of similar? Yes, I see how it's kind of similar. Thank you, Alan. So I'm not going to try and like lay that out, but I'll try and like sketch the actual action of the film, which happens that there's a couple of stories that end up kind of getting braided together. So this is all about the sanatorium. What's the right
torium? I think sanatorium
in Battle Creek, which was run by Dr. John.
Michigan, right?
I assume so. Is there another Battle Creek? My geography is real bad.
It's my downfall. I'm a smart person, except for geography.
Battle Creek in some state. So there's a SAN. They call it the SAN, Battle Creek SAN, that Dr. John Harvey Kellogg runs. Now, Battle Creek is also, we learn very early in the movie, like the breakfast cereal capital of the United States, where there are over 100 different breakfast cereals being produced in Battle Creek alone. So Kellogg's cornflakes are not the only ones. And Dr. Kellogg has a brother who has apparently lent his Kellogg name to a separate cornflake, which I think might be the one that we eat now, because I feel like that's William, isn't it? And this was John Harvey. Anyway, irrelevant. So we meet Dr. Kellogg immediately, and he's doing exercise on this rotating platform and talking to reporters. So he's like pulling down alternating arms on these pulleys. His feet are in two separate tubs, and he's talking. This is Anthony Hopkins wearing buck teeth and like a mustache. It's bizarre. But at first he's talking, you're like, oh, the two different tubs of water for his feet's kind of weird, but he sounds like he knows what he's talking about. But then he says, one of the reporters asks about sex, and he says like, no sex. No sex. He says something like, I don't know if he says it at that moment, but he definitely says, an erection is a flagpole on your grave. So it is made very clear from this very opening scene that he likes a lot of roughage. He believes in lots of poop, like people should be pooping a lot more than they are, and no sex whatsoever. Also no meat. And so we're seeing like sort of almost like B-roll from around this sand where there are people in this turn of the 20th century dress, like jogging and doing sort of calisthenics, like arms out, like touching one foot and then the other with their arms out, and like this weird rhythmic laughing it's bizarre. In the midst of this, we meet a couple who are on their way to the sand. So it's Matthew Broderick and Bridget Fonda as William and Eleanor Lightbody. Eleanor has been there before. William has not. And we see immediately that he is unwell. He has digestive issues. They meet on the train Charles Ossining, played by John Cusack. Apparently the Guy Girls are on a Cusack streak right now.
It's not a bad streak to be on.
Yeah. So Ossining is on his way to Battle Creek because he actually is, we learn when he meets this couple on the train, he is starting a business. They're going to make cornflakes, Perfo cornflakes, PER-FO cornflakes. And so we learn later he's got seed money from his aunt, and he has a business partner who's supposed to have been like establishing, like spending the capital to like buy a factory and get workers to like make this breakfast cereal. And the partner, who is played by Michael Lerner, his name's Mr. Bender, we can see that he's just squandered it. But he manages to convince Cusack's character that it's fine and they're going to make this work, and, they're going to find another investor and whatever. So the light bodies get to the sand, and like, it's real weird there. They get separated immediately, but not into separate sex wings, because across the hall from Mr. Lightbody is Ida Muntz, played by Laura Flynn Boyle, wearing like very pale makeup with a greenish tinge. And we learn immediately that like enemas are a big part of the treatment at the sand. So we see a scene fairly early on that I'm sure was very uncomfortable for us sitting in Dad's living room, where Matthew Broderick's character is being given an enema somewhat forcibly by a very attractive nurse. And she's like saying how, you shouldn't, like, something, she's repeating the thing that Kellogg said about sex being off limits in a much more poetic way than I'm going to remember. And he was like, I'm having sexual feelings. I think I have an erection. Like, while she's like, anyway, it is deeply embarrassing. So we learn along the way that Mr. Lightbody had been a drunk. Mrs. Lightbody had found some like snake oil that was like liquor be gone or something, and she would put a drop of it in his tea every night, and it just made him sleep. And it was such a relief to her to just make him sleep. And then she realized she was pregnant. She went to the sand to give birth. the baby died. While she was away in her confinement, he had this bottle analyzed, and it turns out it was opium. So she feels terrible because she turned him into an opium addict, which is why he's having all of these digestive troubles now. He can't keep anything down. He eats just dry toast and water all the time, and we see him vomit more than once. It's what a movie. Anyway, so lots of weird things happen. Then we meet Dr. Kellogg's estranged son, George, adopted son. He adopted we hear from George that he adopted 39. He has 39 brothers and sisters. And we see memories, flashbacks of George as a young man, like just not quite fitting in, like not making eye contact, whatever. And like there's this extended scene, which is the thing that I remember from 94, where he's meant to be maybe 9-ish. And he keeps leaving just dropping his coat on the floor. So Dr. Kellogg tells their nurse, maid, nanny, I don't know, like George needs to go out the front door, come in the front door, walk up the stairs, hang up his coat, take his coat back off the hook, go back outside and do it again until bedtime tonight, start tomorrow and do it till 4 p.m. And so we watch the kid do this several times, and then we see the next day, Dr. Kellogg comes home and the nurse, Hannah, has fallen asleep while George is doing this over and over and over again. And the doctor says, I said till 4, it's 7. Why is he still doing it? And she says, we try to get him to stop. He won't stop. And then whatever montage, like now it's after bedtime and Dr. Kellogg gets up and he physically stops George, holds him by the shoulders and says, please, please go to bed. So George walks past him, drops the coat on the floor and goes to bed. After having hung the coat up from coming in the house hundreds of times at that point. That stuck in my head. In a separate flashback, we see George get annoyed with the food that they're eating because Dr. Kellogg is a strict vegetarian. So all the kids are eating this, I don't know, it looks like oatmeal, but some sort of gruel. And he says, I don't remember how it starts, but George says, you call this food? We want real food, meat and potatoes, meat and potatoes. And he starts clicking his spoon on the bowl, meat and potatoes, like a chant. And all the other kids are laughing. And anyway, again, montage, we see the table has been cleared and it's hours later and George is still sitting at the table going, meat and potatoes, hitting his spoon against the bowl. Now, today,
is that shown as in the film, is that played for heartbreak? Is that played for laughs? That, because it sounds heartbreaking as you're describing it.
It is not played for laughs. I mean, the dropping the coat was definitely, I think, meant to be funny, but not laugh out loud funny, just sort of wow. The meat and potatoes thing is not funny at all. No. Mm-hmm. And in fact, Mrs. Kellogg is sitting on the stairs, listening to George continuing to do the meat and potatoes chant when Dr. Kellogg comes out and sits down next to her and is what did I do wrong? Why is he like this? Mm-hmm. I've tried to give him everything. And she says, maybe what you're giving him is not what he wants. So that's not meant to be funny at all. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But we see that childhood memory after we have met George today, played by Dana Carvey, with bad teeth and drunk all the time. And the first time we meet him sort of asking Kellogg for money and being sent away. And then we see Mrs. Lightbody, Bridget Fonda, is in one of the baths. They have these different baths and she's in one of the baths by herself and hears him. And he's behind this curtain and she's she's naked. We actually have seen some boobs. So we know she's naked and it's a very tense moment. We're not sure what's going to happen. And in fact, she's why are you here? And he says he's Kellogg's son and he's there for money and also to see that he likes looking at the naked ladies' bodies or something like that. So it's tense. Nothing untoward happens except for some leering. He doesn't actually threaten her in any way, although he is undressing by the time workers at the sand interrupt him and run him off. George becomes partners with Mr. Othening and Mr. Bender.
John Cusack's character.
John Cusack and Michael Lerner's characters. That he becomes a partner so that they can be Kellogg Perfo. Since he's George Kellogg.
He's got the name. Yeah.
And we see them like trying to make cornflakes and it's not good. Like they're terrible. We watch like this montage of them eating 22 batches that some dude they hired who used to work for Dr. Kellogg but was not a baker or a cook. He was like worked in the stable. And like all 22 batches are disgusting and like not even the pigs will eat them. So they end up stealing Kellogg cornflakes and putting them in their boxes. That all comes to light eventually. Meanwhile, the things that you remember, so Mrs. Lightbody, under the influence of Virginia, who the Cameron Manheim character, is learning about this alternate health guru who actually says sex is good. And, you know, we hear her, Cameron Manheim's character, tell the women are riding bicycles, and which is apparently frowned upon for women to ride bicycles back home where Bridget Fonda's from, Mrs. Lightbody's from. And Virginia, Cameron Manheim's character is like, you know, my husband's pretty useless in the sexual satisfaction department, which is why I go for a bike ride once a week. They call it the bicycle smile, and I feel a smile coming on. You go ahead. So we see that she has like, she's under her influence. We meet a different doctor, Badger, and then another doctor, a German name whose name I don't remember, who does this therapeutic massage, which is actually the clitoral stimulation. So she's being sort of like radicalized around sexual pleasure on that side. And she has this great line when she's telling the story about how he was a drunk. And Virginia's like, yeah, and he wanted sex all the time, didn't he? And she's like, yeah. And they basically say it was terrible. It was just bang, bang, thanks. And she says, I just want to be more than a hole in the mattress with a name. And I was like, damn, that's, wow. Okay. While Matthew Broderick is going through all these bizarre treatments that we see many of, like being like sprayed with very high pressure water and like big loofahs and like under these like tents with electric blankets. And so he and Laura Flynn Boyle's character have this weird little flirtation where he actually has sex with her twice. Not sexy at all. And we also see him like in these baths so the men are sitting in baths, like just their sort of tush and pelvis. Each foot is in a separate tub, and electric current is being run through the ones that their nethers are in. And it's supposed to diminish sexual feelings, but it's clear that it has the opposite effect, the way they're talking to each other.
Oh my God.
But then, like, the second or third time we see them in these baths, like, something goes wrong, and the operator and they call him Mr. Unpronounceable, this Russian dude who only speaks Russian, are both electrocuted to death. And Matthew Broderick's like, what the hell is this place? We're supposed to be so healthy. And like, they just died. Like, what? Like, he's having a very reasonable reaction to this. Meanwhile, Kellogg's like secretary who was following around behind him, like suddenly has a heart attack and keels over. And Kellogg's like, this is very unprofessional. This is very unprofessional that you would have a heart attack and die at a health sanitarium, whatever it is. And like, that's the first moment that we see him not, like, he was a wacko before that moment. But I didn't think he was like morally bankrupt before that moment. Yeah. Right? Because he actually like kicks the secretary's, who's a man, like kicks at his arm. Very unprofessional.
Oh my God.
And all of these, and then Laura Flynn Boyle's character has died in the middle of the night. So like Matthew Broderick's character is like, we're here to get healthy and people are dying everywhere. It all comes to a head. Charles Austin, however you say his name, John Cusack's character has been arrested for fraud. And George, Dana Carvey's the estranged son, has set fire using fireworks to the sanitarium. And it is like exploding and burning. So there's a fire truck, except it's a carriage, like drawn by horses, coming toward the sand, while the cops with John Cusack in the kind of jail wagon going away from the sand, and they actually like have a collision. So Ossining gets away, and the couple has come back together that day. The light bodies have come back together that day. Broderick, Mr. Lightbody, and his nurse sort of started canoodling in a boat, and he's like, I can't do this because I love my wife. And he like actually gets out in the middle of the lake and walks to the shore and ends up finding her being, she's still mostly dressed, but the doctor who has his hands on her genitals and Virginia's is naked, and so is the other doctor who's masturbating while watching all of this.
I am really understanding why this was so uncomfortable to watch with our dad.
So they've come back together, and he's like, what the hell? What were you doing? He was elbow deep in you. And she's like, you don't understand.
I remember that line.
It makes me happy. I feel happy. You don't know what it's like to be happy. And he's like, but I am happy. I really am. I feel great. And they're like, oh, well, maybe we can go home. So they're like walking back to the sand after being reunited, and it's all being destroyed. And then we hear sort of Mrs. Lightbody tells us what happened. They went back to wherever they were from. They had 4 daughters. Mr. Ossining actually he had borrowed money from Mr. Lightbody. He sends them a check. I mean, their daughters are all grown, and they didn't have any at the time. So this is many, many years later, but he sends a check for the amount of money that he had borrowed. And it turns out he got very rich. The charges were all but forgotten because of the destruction at the sand. And he got very rich when he realized that if you combine sugar water with the leaf of a cocoa tree, that you could make something delicious. And there's like a picture of him. It's not Coca-Cola, but it's meant to be something like that. And then we hear like what happened. The sand was rebuilt, even better. And Dr. Kellogg, then we see the scene that you remember where he's like on this high dive and is about to jump into the lake and ends up dying mid-dive. So we sort of hear what happened to some of the key players. So there's one scene that I'm just going to back up just to tell you, because I actually believe this entire screenplay was written for this one line. After everybody dies, Matthew Broderick's character, Mr. Lightbody, like kind of runs away and ends up at this bar and restaurant where he runs into John Cusack's character, and he gets drunk and he eats a cheeseburger, and they get drunk together and they're having a really good time. That's when he lends him the money. And he says, Broderick says, you really are my friend. And you know what? With friends like these, and Cusack finishes it, who needs enemas? And that, I believe, with friends like these, who needs enemas, was the entire impetus for this whole movie being made. I think someone was like, we have to make a movie so we can say this line. So anyway. There's so much more that happens. There's so much embarrassing shit. There's so many tushies. There's so many masturbation jokes. Like, there is an electric masturbation belt that Matthew Broderick wears at one point. There's just so much that I just can't get into. But that's like the gist of it. That's the gist
Considering how much Dad needed to know about movies before he'd watched them, I'm surprised we watched this together. He must not have known.
Yeah, he must not have. Or he thought it was just about like the sort of wacky health bit.
Well, he needed to know if there was any child endangerment. That was the only thing he needed to know.
And there
about.
wasn't.
There was none.
And there wasn't.
Yeah.
No. I mean,
because that was the thing he couldn't handle in movies.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think I want to start, and like most of what analysis I have that's actually like beyond like, yeah, lots of fart jokes, lots of masturbation jokes, is about health as a business and what can be trusted, right? Because, and I think there's like, this movie actually, I think, trying to make us laugh, but also trying to be a little bit nuanced, because for sure we're meant to think Kellogg is a wacko and
A charlatan. Yeah.
Not a charlatan.
Okay.
Not a
Because he
charlatan.
believes it.
He genuinely believes it and he lives it. But like the whole sex thing, we find out, I mean, I don't know if it's to be trusted, but someone suggests that he had the mumps and is impotent as a result of a childhood illness. And we do hear like he doesn't have sex and has never had sex. And so,
which is why all of his children are adopted.
Yeah. But if he's impotent, like I've never had sex, like, well.
So it's not a sacrifice for you. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And so we're definitely meant to see him as wacky.
Mm-hmm.
Right? But he is not trying to trick anyone.
Mm-hmm.
On the other hand, we have Bender, Mr. Bender, but what is it? Goodlow Bender, played really deliciously by Michael Lerner, who is trying to cheat everyone, including his business partner, John Cusack's Mr. Ossining, Charles Ossining. So we have both of those in like as kind of primary players. And we know that we've been told from the very beginning, there are hundreds of breakfast cereals being produced in Battle Creek alone. So, and we hear the story of the like liquor be gone that turned out to be opium, you know? And so there's this like, there's evidence of true charlatanism, like snake oil, just like tell you what you want to hear if it'll make you buy it, right? On the other hand, Matthew Broderick's William Lightbody is in a really bad way when we meet him, and he's better. He genuinely gets better from his time at the Sand. So, and Dr. Kellogg, wacko that he may be, genuinely believes in what he is peddling. He's not like Mr. Bender, who knows he's selling you false promises. Like, in fact, that final scene that you remember when he dies after saying, "I may live forever," Bridget Fonda's voiceover says, he died mid-dive, proving that even he could be wrong. So, you know, it's like there's a tension, I think, that the movie makers are inviting us to kind of hold that, like, yeah, a lot of these people are lying to us just to get our money. And also, there may be something to at least some of it. Like, you know, maybe it's like if it's Aesop's fable, maybe it's a lesson about moderation, possibly. Maybe it's about being careful about who you trust and like knowing all the pieces. I'm not 100% sure, but I think it's interesting that these things are held sort of side by side. This is not just a straight up indictment of health as a business. And it does suggest that most of the time it's probably, you know, nonsense. And I think it's interesting. This is made in the mid-90s and set in the like late, I think it's, based on my research, I think it's meant to be 1907. From the movie itself, it's unclear. It could be anywhere from like 1895 to like 1910, just based on like my imprecise understanding of fashion. But it's somewhere in that like turn of the 20th century range, around 1900. So I think there's something interesting about sort of in the mid-90s, sort of saying like, yeah, but remember when like breakfast cereal was considered a health food? Like maybe just like slow your roll.
Quit it with the snack wells. Because that was when the snack well cookies, everything was low fat.
Yeah, when we thought that lipids were our enemy.
Yeah. So I want to stick with this for a minute because there's a podcast that I love called Maintenance Phase that they talk about a lot of this kind of stuff about like health as a business and how oftentimes now you get a lot of people who are charlatans, but you also have people who are the true believers. And what they're selling is not necessarily bad, except that it's taken to this extreme because it is the idea that something that works for an individual will work for everyone. When health is And especially when it comes to things like weight loss, because that's what maintenance phase often talks about is weight loss stuff. When it comes to weight loss, bodies are so idiosyncratic.
Mm-hmm.
And then you get to, when you have the true believers, you get to people who cannot fathom the idea of ever being wrong about something. And then you get RFK peddling anti-vax stuff and eating carcasses off the road.
Ew, ew.
Yeah. But if you're just listening to like the base level stuff that RFK Jr. is talking about, it actually sounds somewhat reasonable in the same way that the base level stuff that Kellogg was talking about early on, which is like plenty of roughage. We should be moving our bowels more often than we are. Like the
exercise. Exercise was important to him.
Exercise is important. So RFK is saying stuff like, we need to eat less processed foods. We're all eating too much sugar. Like, what are these dyes that we're putting in our food? Like, our children need to be moving more, and like we should be, having more protein in our diets. All of those sound perfectly reasonable. And then all of a sudden you drop off a cliff and it's like, sex is bad. And you should have enormous poops multiple times a day. And then you have like vaccines cause autism. And so all of a sudden we have children dying from preventable diseases.
Completely preventable diseases. Yeah.
And like, okay, yeah, we're going to eat dead bears that were killed in car accidents. Like, what?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's sort of a human nature when someone has seen results from one specific thing. It's like, you know this. Listeners may not know. I was diagnosed with fibromyalgia when I was 23, so a long time ago. And I went to all kinds of different people, like some quacks, some legitimate doctors. And like every new person, like, the podiatrist was sure that he could cure, I'm putting quotes around that word, my fibromyalgia symptoms if he could correct my foot strike. Right. And, I had this like wacky dentist who was sure that he could cure, quotes, my fibromyalgia if he could correct my bite, and so like everybody who was a hammer saw me as a nail, when in fact, like, yeah, probably there were adjustments to my foot strike that would help. And probably there were adjustments to my bite that would help. But like, it was the actual constellation of symptoms and pathology was so much more complicated than any of them were holding. And I feel like people become very zealous when they have seen results from something, right, about anything. And so, the person who, like the weightlifter, who's eating all this protein and feeling so much better and having so much more energy and able to do more whatever, like trying to push protein on everyone. Like, I don't know. Yeah, maybe I could use more protein in my diet, but it's not a silver bullet. There's no such thing.
And then on the other side of the equation, you have when people, especially when it comes to something like health, when people don't feel well, they become desperate for a simple answer.
Oh, I know. That's exactly why. I mean,
and that's why I'm not saying that for you. I'm saying that just because. And that's why in every era we have new health gurus.
Yeah.
Because in every era we have new people who are who are vulnerable to the grift, whether if they're charlatans or primed to listen to the true believers because they just want some relief. And then for people like the Matthew Broderick's character who do feel better because, some little thing did help. He needed to detox. I mean, like it might have just been, he needed some time to detox. And like he was like all of the other shenanigans that were going on that distracted him from the opium addiction, like the embarrassment and the enemas and all of that. So he was detoxing. So he felt better.
Right.
I think it's worthwhile telling these stories from a different era because it makes it easier to recognize it in our era because it's divorced. Like if you were to make a movie about anti-vaxxers now, people would be frothing at the mouth.
Right. It also helps to remember that we, whatever current generation, did not invent like health crazes.
Absolutely.
I think that's actually really helpful because they're new crazes. And so it seems like we invented them.
Yes.
But, you know,
absolutely.
We didn't.
I'd love to talk about the sexuality aspect.
Yeah, I want to go there. So it's interesting that often in society in general, in Western culture in general, there's a lot of policing of women's sexuality and less so of men's. Not none, but less so. In this movie, while Dr. Kellogg, is very unhappy. In fact, he brings Mr. Lightbody into his office to say, you need to see to your wife because she's been going to see this charlatan who's been giving her, you know, therapeutic massages or whatever. Like he tells Lightbody what's happening and then immediately embarrasses Lightbody by showing like, I don't know, like 50 nurses this electronic masturbation belt that he has and reminds him again of the erection is a flagpole on your grave thing. Male sexuality, the sin of onanism, is invoked several times. It's like very much like a piece of the charlatanism, or not, sorry, a piece of the evangelism of Kellogg. Like he is like, he doesn't want men to have erections and he certainly doesn't want them to touch them if they get them. And that's very important to him, which is unusual in Western culture. And I think part of that, like being unusual, is how we know as viewers that we can't trust 100% of what Kellogg says.
Yeah, I was going to ask that. Is that how it's like, you know, like, okay, he seems okay. Oh, no, clearly this guy is off his rocker.
Yes.
Okay.
That is exactly how it happens. And from the very beginning, while he's on this rotating platform doing the exercise, and you're like, okay, that's weird, but like it's 1900, so like, I don't know, maybe. And then he says the thing about sex and you're like, oh, yep, nope, he's in a tub. And I think that's really interesting when we pull back and sort of realize that like policing male sexuality, like even to the extent of like masturbation and like that sort of like an erection is a flagpole on your grave, like that's proof that you're unhealthy. That's where, as the viewer, you're like, oh, this guy's a whack job. That's the shorthand. And I think that's really interesting when I sort of zoom out. It like makes sense. If instead he'd been saying like, you know, women who want to have pleasure during sex instead of just for procreation, like they're hysterical and we need to like put control on that, like at least some viewers would be like, oh, let's hear what he has to say.
Now, I do have one question about that because that's, well, I don't think you're wrong, especially for like in 1994, but he wasn't that far off historically? Like, isn't that historically somewhat accurate? I mean, there were the like the idea that you'd grow hair on your palms if you masturbated.
Palms. I mean, yeah, like we certainly were as a society like discouraging young men from masturbating, but I don't think that there were many who were suggesting that married men should be refraining from having sex with their wives.
Okay.
I don't think that there were many like thought leaders.
That was the part that took it from like, yeah.
He wasn't just saying the sin of onanism is bad. Yeah. I think a lot of people were saying that.
Yeah. Okay.
He was saying like no sex ever.
Yeah.
He was actually saying that that's vital fluids that you need to hold on to. You shouldn't be like losing that vital fluid.
So
unless you want to procreate, that's the only reason.
Okay. I was going to say like, what was his answer to children?
Yeah. I think he believed he was lucky enough that he didn't have to worry about that. I mean, this character, I don't know if Dr. Kellogg actually felt that way. I'm just saying the character in this movie.
Because this is very much fictionalized. It's based on a real character.
It is based on a real guy, but like he didn't die that way. He died in his sleep, apparently. The sand did burn down, but it was not burned down by an estranged son. And by 1907, when this is supposed to have taken place, it had already been rebuilt. So there are definitely like seeds of historical accuracy in this film. But it is not a like fully accurate biopic. So the last thing I guess I'll just say really quickly before I reflect back is, my questions about this Dana Carvey's George, and actually it's the child is where I really felt this way, is whether or not he was meant to be coded as neurodivergent. I think the staying on the annoying task or the task that was given so long after most people would have just gotten bored or whatever, read to me as perhaps hyperfixation or perhaps a form of stimming. I don't know. I actually am not an expert in neurodivergence. And so I don't know exactly what it is that I'm trying to map from this behavior and this character to a diagnosis or what's the word that I want to say? A neurological reality. I don't know what I'm mapping. But watching it now versus in 94, instead of just being I think in 94, I was probably damn, that came weird, right? And now I'm oh, I wonder what's happening with this young person's brain and what different supports would have had different outcomes. I mean, obviously a more loving approach would have had a different outcome. But the other siblings, we see them and they're not having similar reactions. So there's something atypical about George. So I don't know where I'm going with this, but it's interesting to see it these 30 plus years later and the difference that we as a society understand about neurodivergence. It just makes me approach the whole character differently. So I just wanted to kind of name that. And any response to that?
It does strike me as something that would be a hyperfixation, especially if there's shame attached to it, as which would be why he kept going with the coat activity. And then the thing that I was thinking was how parenting has changed so much over the past 100 and so many years, because the idea that a father would say, make him do this all day and consider that an appropriate consequence for such a minor infraction, and that that's such cruelty, such incredible cruelty, and not anticipate that would have repercussions for his relationship with his child as an adult. And so, and then also when, just to tie it back to vaccines cause autism, the fact that we wouldn't necessarily recognize people who have autism prior to a better diagnosis, in part because, we had that kind of parenting back then. And so unless someone was so neurodivergent that they were incapable of masking and being, somewhat fitting into society, and just, people being that guy's kind of quirky, kind of weird. It's all part and parcel of the way that society has changed and become more welcoming to people who don't fit.
Yeah. Okay. I have some more stuff to say. I'm going to save it for the shit we forgot to say for patrons. I actually have more to say about George, but I'm going to come back to it in our bonus content. So right now, I'm going to try and reflect back to you some of the things that we said. I didn't name. This movie passes Bechdel because we have many named female characters and they talk to each other. It's interesting because their conversations actually sort of often start with men and then go in other places. But at a minimum, Virginia and Eleanor talk about bicycling. So there are other examples as well. So I think I didn't say that earlier, but it definitely passes Bechdel. And also there are many moments where these two named characters are talking about men. So both are true. Oh, one other thing too, the sort of rival guy who's pro-sex, at one point he says to Eleanor, "And your glasses, they're a crutch for your eyes. Throw them into the fire." That's how we know that's how we know he is a wacko. So anyway, okay. So this movie, Road to Wellville, all-star cast. I mean, really remarkable cast. These men and women were household names even in 1994. So, I mean, I think that's really worth noting. And yet this film, the script, it just doesn't, unless you're like, again, super into like scatological humor, male tushies and boobies, it just doesn't really hold up. Now, if you're into those things, this is your movie. Like, you should go watch it right now if you're like super into those three things. But if you're not, it's like, It does have a lot of interesting things to make us think about health as a business, to think about health gurus and what we can trust from health gurus and what we can't. Because sometimes they are selling us snake oil that is nothing. It's water in a vial. It's a breakfast cereal that they want to tell us is a panacea.
Or even worse, it's actually harmful.
Right. And sometimes they believe in that breakfast cereal so completely that they are willing to, they eat their own dog food. They're willing to like do the things. They're doing all the things and they genuinely believe that they will help you. And that doesn't mean that they will, but it doesn't mean that they won't either. Like, this movie is like willing to hold those competing truths at the same time, which is, I actually think that is the sign of intellect, is to be able to hold competing truths at the same time. So that's worth noting. I think storytelling wise, in sort of giving that message, it's interesting to note that it's mid-90s when there are all kinds of health crazes that we thought we invented at the time. And we did invent the specific craze, but the idea of a health craze, we did not invent. And this movie helps us to see when it's sort of set at the turn of the 20th century, when it was made at the end of the 20th century, that like every generation's got something, and what, like, some of it's true and some of it's not true. And that's probably the case now. So that's sort of an interesting thing to take away. One thing that I noted is that I think the screenwriter, the director, the actors were all super proud of, with friends like these, who needs enemas? So that's my thesis about this film. And then the last thing is like, there's something about sexuality in this movie that like, this movie sort of talks about male sexuality and policing male sexuality in a way that is so countercultural. That's how we knew from the get-go that Dr. Kellogg was at least a little bit off his rocker with what he was proposing. So, and I think like we're meant to have sympathy for these women who are receiving sometimes, like, the implication maybe for Bridget Fonda, like her first orgasm possibly ever. Like, we are definitely meant to have sympathy for her. And also like the guys, the doctors, I'm putting quotes around that, who are helping her achieve them, we are meant to judge harshly. Like, these guys are like not okay. So again, competing multiple truths are true. Did I forget anything?
No, just George's neurodivergence.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, the character of George, who in the 90s, we were just like, weird. Now, I think there's a much more nuanced take on him and why he behaved the way that he did and why his father's discipline and parenting style did not work and caused such estrangement. Yeah. Okay, next week, I believe we have a guest?
No.
Right?
Oh, yes, we do. That's right. Next week, we have a guest. We have my friend Zena Kumak will be coming on to give us her deep thoughts about the TV show The Nanny.
Looking forward to that.
Yeah, it's going to be great.
This show is a labor of love, but that doesn't make it free to produce. If you enjoy it even half as much as we do, please consider helping to keep us overthinking. You can support us at our Patreon. There's a link in the show notes. Or leave a positive review so others can find us. And of course, share the show with your people. Thanks for listening. Our theme music is Professor Umlaut by Kevin MacLeod from Incompetech.com. Find full music credits in the show notes.
Thank you to Resonate Recordings for editing today's episode.
Until next time, remember, pop culture is still culture. And shouldn't you know what's in your head?